We all just basically accept that traditional media, newspapers, television news, etc., get things wrong sometimes. Yet when the misinformation is being spread by social media, everybody loses their minds. This is treated like a very threat to our democracy. Quick, call the regulators. Summon Congress back into session. Someone somewhere is wrong on Facebook. It's unending. Just a few days ago, Filipino journalist Maria Ressa, the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize winner, said Facebook was biased against facts. Let's listen.
Look, I worry that you can't have integrity of elections if you don't have integrity of facts. And right now you don't have that. In fact, I would say that the platform is biased against facts. The reality, the data shows us that lies laced with anger and hate spread faster and further than really boring facts.
Look, there's no doubt you can read things on Facebook that are false, but you can also read things that are false on the front pages of the New York Times. The difference is that the conversation on social media has fewer guardrails. Now, people like Frances Haugen, the much celebrated Facebook whistleblower, think that's a bad thing. But if Facebook vanished tomorrow, we would still consume a lot of bad pandemic info. There would just be fewer options to discuss and challenge it. And that's what the anti-Facebook crowd in Washington really wants. It's not about stopping Mark Zuckerberg. It's about silencing the rest of us. So, Kim, this is, I've been sounding this kind of note a lot. I think some of the criticism of social media, not all of it, but some of it is reminiscent of moral panic. And it just, like, a lot of the things they accuse social media of getting wrong or of being bad on are also, like, massive problems in just the media we've already had. Some of them are worse. And I don't want to go back to that. Am I crazy to think that?
No, I mean, they say that Facebook and these other platforms, they thrive off of sensationalism, but so does the news, right? I mean, to your point, and the news has been wrong a number of times. I mean, we have like Rachel Maddow when she was tweeting out even about the Oklahoma hospital that was overwhelmed because people were overdosing on ivermectin, right? That ended up being false. We have the Russian bounties story saying, that American troops were being, that Russia put bounties on American troops. That was a discredited story. Also, the Brian Sicknick was killed by Trump supporters. That ended up also not being true. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation that is being put out there by the New York Times, by MSNBC, by CNN, by all of these outlets, that are looking for those sensationalized headlines. And so, yeah, it is true that, we've always known this in the media. I mean, before the COVID pandemic, before Trump, it was, sex sells or disaster. If it bleeds, it leads, right? So we know that that this sort of sensational information is, of course, going to trend, whether it be on social media and people are going to be sharing it a lot, or whether it causes these major outlets to get the clicks and the eyeballs that they want. And so if we are going to be critical of social media and say that they're responsible for this, then we have to be critical of all media in general, because all media is actually responsible for
no one says break up.
Sensationalism.
There's this kind of dynamic where we talk about, or other people in the media go, oh, this is really controversial. This is dangerous. It's cover your children's ears, and then it ends up making the thing probably like more popular and more people want to see it. Like if what you're trying to do is get people to tune out Chappelle, probably generating all this enormous buzz for the special is totally backfiring.
Right. Yeah, I think that this opens up a greater conversation. I haven't seen Dave Chappelle's special, but I think this opens up a greater conversation of, can comedy be funny without being offensive? And I think that is where we're at with society, is trying to figure out, what jokes can be made about certain groups of people, if at all. And I kind of err on the side of, I think comedy can be funny without picking at certain groups of people, without kind of stereotyping or honing in on certain traits or honing in on sensitive topics. I mean, look, I am totally against cancel culture. I think if Netflix wants to air this special, they certainly can, and people can choose to watch it and enjoy it or not enjoy it if they would like to. But I do think that there can be maybe this conversation. I don't know what you guys think on, can comedy be funny without it being offensive, or is that just the nature of comedy and we should just accept it?
Right. Well, there can be a difference, I think, between making fun of a specific person and then groups of people for some kind of collective trait that they don't have any control over, like race or gender or something like that. But, even that aside, I think we're increasingly, or a small minority of extremely sensitive people are on behalf of all of us now drawing the line a lot differently than how most people feel. And this is an interesting moment because Netflix was pretty firm here in saying that, no, this is comedy, it might be offensive, but there's a stricter standard, and actually the employee getting in trouble, where in a lot of other examples, I think if the person is less important financially to the company, as Dave Chappelle's probably obviously bringing them a lot of money. If it's someone, Dave Chappelle almost can't be canceled because he's so powerful and he's so good at what he does. Whereas a lesser person at the company could easily be let go for offending someone in a different context.
Yeah, and to me, the answer to Kim's good question is if it lands. Like if the joke lands, then it worked. But that's not a very satisfying definition,
right?
Because what does it mean? What does it mean for a joke to land? And it doesn't always land for everybody.
And the latest survey numbers from Pew Research show Biden's support amongst Black respondents declined nearly 20 points in just 2 months, from 85% approving of the president's job performance in July to a new low of just 67% in September. One political organizer told the Washington Post, "I think the frustration is at an all-time high, and Biden can't go to Georgia or any other Black state in the South and say, this is what we delivered in 2021. Black men are pissed off about the nothingness that has happened. Does it make the work harder? It makes the work damn near impossible." Brianna, what's your reaction to that, and particularly to how dramatic the changes, that 20-point drop in just a couple of months is huge. What is driving something so big in such short amount of time?
It's not surprising to me at all. I remember watching videos of organizers in Georgia months and months ago saying that they were not going to be able to go back to voters with the same slate of promises that they used to seduce them to vote for Joe Biden the last time around and get them to turn out for midterms or in the next presidential race on those same promises when there hadn't been any follow through. I think increasingly you're seeing with polls, the Black voters are slowly inching away from their solid support of the Democratic Party, like all Americans, increasingly identifying as independents as frustration with government grows. And in 2016, the great narrative that the Democratic Party adopted for why Hillary Clinton lost was simply Trump's racism. But in the face of a midterm election with no looming Republican zealot on the horizon, and Black and Latino voters really leading the way in terms of the defection from the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party has to take a good hard look at itself and take responsibility for the fact that it has failed to deliver on the promises that are supposed to make being a Democrat worth it.
And here's my guess. I'm curious for your take. It's end of next summer, as we're heading into the midterms, you'll start to see Democrats kicking around the idea of another round of checks. And that there will be campaigning around the midterms that if you make sure that Democrats still have the House and the Senate in 2023, then we're going to send out another round of checks to everybody. Could you see Democrats going to that well again? And do you think that it has any chance of working a second time around?
They could. I mean, the politics of that seem a little
dicey,
unwise.
right?
You know, last time around, we were coming out, we were really in the thick of a global pandemic. The checks were needed by everyone. And I think we're less vulnerable to being described as some kind of like welfare for the undeserving poor, the way that Republicans tend to frame these things. This far into the pandemic, when obviously millions of people are still suffering grievously, but it's framed very different in the media. It seems less like a shared crisis and also very opportunistically trotted out before an election cycle. I mean, the thing to do would have been to make them permanent and then say we have to keep Congress in order to maintain this program. I think that would have been a much stronger argument. I mean, on some level, Democrats seem to understand that as they're making cuts to their reconciliation bills, that it's better to keep the policies that they want, but shorten the time frame, but not compromise on means testedness, hoping and relying on the fact that once these policies are implemented, it will be very difficult to undo because people will feel them in their lives and resist them being taken away by a subsequent Republican administration. They understand that now, but for some reason didn't understand the benefits of doing that with the $2,000 checks then, and I'm afraid they're going to pay the piper.
Something that could scramble another round of checks conversation is the fact that a lot of workers have been forced out of their jobs by President Biden's vaccine mandate as it's implemented by a lot of corporations. And I can foresee a time when Republicans maybe own the libs by championing checks in a similar way.